be giving a short introduction to today's session, an introduction to knowledge management for law firms. And our presenters are Connie Crosby, who is a law librarian who now works as a consultant specializing in knowledge management, information management, and social media for the legal industry, and Stephanie Barnes, who has over 10 years of experience in knowledge management and accounting in the high technology, healthcare, and public accounting sectors.
Great, thanks very much. How many people saw my demo earlier over the lunch? Okay, sort of half of people. Okay, that's fine. This is actually somewhat separate from that. This is kind of the theory of knowledge management in behind it. We're not actually talking about our coaching service and our online service. We're sort of taking a more theoretical approach. And hopefully this will, if you did see the demo, hopefully this will explain a little bit more about what we were doing. So we had a quick introduction. I was a law librarian with Weir Foltz here in Toronto for 10 years. I was the library manager. I also have a library MLS, a library degree, also information management certificate from the iSchool Institute at the University of Toronto. And I also instruct at the iSchool Institute, Faculty of Information, University of Toronto, and I'm a core contributor to the collaborative blog slaw.ca. And I'll let Stephanie introduce herself.
So I'm an accountant in IT management by education. I have an undergrad in accounting and an MBA in IT. Started doing knowledge management while I was at Hewlett-Packard and have been out on my own doing knowledge management consulting for the last 8.5 years. And I'm based in Toronto.
Okay. So we're going to talk about, like I say, the theory of knowledge management. There are many different definitions of knowledge management out there. And the one that we've been working with has been connecting people to the knowledge they need to do their jobs, whether that knowledge is tacit or in their heads, or explicit, documented knowledge. Some people express it as delivering the right knowledge to the right person at the right time in the form that they need to work with it. Similar concept as well. Anyone who is working with an organization to implement knowledge management, and knowledge management at its highest level is a strategic thing to do with a full organization. You would want to actually try to get an organizational definition of knowledge management just so that you're all on the same page and understand what it means, because it is a term that gets bandied around. Some of the benefits of knowledge management, there are many, many benefits. I'm going to give you 4. So one of them would be better organization within the firm. So helping partners, associates, and assistants get their hands on the right documents and information when they are needed. So often, partners are very, very good at organizing themselves and having a whole system, but can a brand new associate coming into the firm or an assistant who works with another partner, can those people find the information? So it's kind of unlocking that content and helping it be more shareable within the organization. Another benefit is the better use of knowledge assets. So making better use of internally developed knowledge assets such as precedents, letters, research memoranda, filings, anything, any kind of work product along those lines. Knowledge sharing, as I say. So taking this step further, being prepared if a partner or associate leaves the firm. Helping lawyers find a way to share that will allow for the continuing of the firm's business. It's fine that somebody has all of this content and has created all of this knowledge over time, but if that person disappears, what happens to the firm? So helping some of that knowledge be retained inside the organization, inside the firm. And improved learning. So the concept, this can take a number of different forms. One would be using lessons learned techniques, which is a knowledge management technique as you work, as you go along, and making assessments to continue so that you can continually improve processes for better client service throughout. Just want to take a step back. I talked about explicit knowledge or documented knowledge. So this can take very many forms. I've listed a few here: business plans, lists of clients. So often those lists are inside people's heads. So getting them into a documented form. work product, as I mentioned, forms and precedents, meeting minutes, blogs and wikis. And there's probably lots of others too we can think of. Tacit knowledge, or knowledge that's in individuals' heads. So ways that we allow people to share what's inside their heads would be the social networks, and we're seeing the rise of sort of the social enterprise, allowing for social inside the organization. In-house training, mentoring, and of course we see mentoring in the form of the articling process. Some firms also have additional mentoring. Community of practice is a knowledge management term, but we see that in the form of practice groups within firms. But there may be other types of communities of practice or groups that come together with a common interest, and matter summaries as well. And there's probably lots of others. When you run into somebody at the water cooler and talk to them, that's transferring the knowledge that's in your head. I'll let Stephanie continue on from here.
Great. Thanks, Connie. You did that faster than I thought you were. So this diagram is looking at the knowledge flow within an organization. It's based on some work done by Nonaka and Takuchi in about the mid-90s, which isn't really important except to say that it's been around for a long time. It's looking at I should have brought a pointer with me, people to people, and moving knowledge from people to a knowledge repository, so documenting it and around and organizing it, again, still in the repository, and moving, again, around one more step from the knowledge repository back to people. So communicating, collecting, organizing, accessing, and then back to communicating. So the knowledge is flowing through the organization with these steps as it comes into people's heads. It hopefully gets documented, or at least some of it gets documented and gets organized and gets accessed or used by people. And that accessing and using it creates more learning, more knowledge within the organization. We're back to people. So that's all I wanted to say about that slide. The approach to knowledge management that we take is looking at people, process, and technology. There's a lot of organizations that will look at either people and process or technology. And to be successful in knowledge management, you need to really look at all three as pillars and do each of them equally. Technology is actually probably the easiest thing to do. The people and process, it's the people that will screw it up every time, because if they don't understand why they should participate, why they should do these activities, they're not going to do them. They will find a way around them. They will keep doing things the way they have always done them. So the people part of that equation is actually a much bigger problem or challenge, I should say, than the other two, for sure. So, and this was just what I was saying about the people. So the change management is a significant part, and you'll see that again in a couple of slides. The change management, so educating people, doing the communication. You can't just communicate once at the beginning or once at the end and hope that people are going to understand. It's communicating throughout and deciding what your message is and why people need to know this, and keeping it simple and keeping them informed. There's training and education, not just on the technology, although certainly that is part of it, but training on the processes, training on the activities, education more generally about knowledge management. And stakeholder management is another key thing. Oftentimes, especially in possibly firms outside of law firms, although it probably happens at law firms too, the VP or executive who has sponsored the activity will move on and get reassigned. And so managing that stakeholder and any change that happens at that level is key to maintaining the activity. Knowledge management isn't something that happens within 3 months or even 6 months. It's a long time objective and activity that continues throughout a 5 or 10 year span. So I wanted to put this up. There's a lot of confusion a lot of times about the KM technologies. This is probably why. There's lots of technologies out there, lots of overlapping, the functionality. So the axes go from individual activities to group or team, and then organization or enterprise, And then across the bottom, scanning or mapping. So that's my search. That's I'm going in and searching and looking for the information that I need, all the way out to transforming and innovate. And a lot of the social media apps or groupware apps come in at that level. So I'm not going to take too much time except to say when you are picking technology, if you are picking a technology, it's important to understand what your requirements are, what you really need, what you're trying to do, and then pick the app based on that, not just because somebody told you how great SharePoint was, or how wonderful Jive was, or how wonderful something else was, and think, oh, that'll solve my problems. Technology will never solve your problems. It will help. It's an enabler, but if you don't do it right, it will cause you more problems than it solves. So for those of you who saw our demo or Connie's demo of our tool at lunchtime, you'll recognize this knowledge management framework. And again, it's looking at knowledge management is a complex area. Every person that practices knowledge management, whether we're talking consultant or someone that's employed full-time, will have a little different definition of knowledge management, will include different things. This is the framework that we have developed. It's certainly what I have worked in knowledge management with for the last 12 and a half years. So we've got governance activities that are purpose, vision, goals, objectives. So understanding the big picture of why are you doing this? Why should I care on a bigger level? There's oversight, so making sure that people are participating, making sure the right people are involved. Policies and procedures activities, so some rules around how to participate, how to use the technology, how the processes work. Life cycle processes. This is something that a lot of organizations ignore. They create all this great content and great documents and great communities of practice, and then they don't know what to do with it. It resides in a repository somewhere and builds up and builds up and builds up, and after 2 or 3 years, there's lots of documents and things in these repositories, and people are saying, well, I can't find what I'm looking for, or this is old, where's the new one? There should be a newer version of this. I can't find the newer version. So the life cycle processes come in to say, this is what we do at the create stage. We're going to manage it and look at when these need to come out of the repository and get archived someplace. And there's a slide later on. I'll talk more about the life cycle, but those activities are key to making sure that the technology in question is usable and maintains its relevance. Metadata and taxonomies, just as how to organize things. Version control, again, is about just keeping track of what's relevant. I'm going to skip over to enabling activities and component activities because I don't want to take up too much time talking about this. I would like to make sure you guys have some time to ask questions. Enabling activities, though, change management, which I mentioned, staffing, so making sure the right people are involved. Technology is an enabler. Professional development and metrics and measurement. Metrics and measurement are key. A lot of people will say, and being an accountant in my previous life, will say that it's hard to put a dollar value on knowledge and I can't measure it, or it's hard to measure, or how do I give a return on investment? And like I say, as the accountant in me will agree that it is hard. It's not impossible. You need to sit down and look at the again, coming back to the purpose and vision. Why are you doing this? I worked with organizations that were trying to improve their customer service, and so they've got metrics on the number of complaints that they're getting and how long it takes them to resolve the complaints. So doing better knowledge management in that case has allowed them to resolve complaints, possibly decrease them in the first place, those kinds of things. So when you know why you're doing it, there are activities you can do to measure. Component activities, there's actually a lot of component activities. We didn't put all the detail in on this slide because you wouldn't be able to read it. But they break down into documented knowledge, document handling, sharing and collaboration activities, supporting activities, and then innovation. Innovation is something that you need to have the rest of it sorted out before you start worrying about innovation. It's sort of one of the more mature activities to come out of a knowledge management program. So I told you there was more to component activities. Is that readable? How readable is that, Beck? Is it okay?
We've got them listed out on the next slides. Yeah.
Okay.
Jump to the next.
So I will jump to the next slide. So documented knowledge is a portal. Who knows what a portal is? Do I need to say what a portal is? Everybody knows what a portal is. Document management, email management, enterprise content management. I'm through these 5 areas. I'm not going to go into detail on each of them. If there's one of them that you don't know that you want me to talk for a minute about, I'm happy to do that. Stick your hand up and stop me, and I will talk about any of those. So, documented knowledge. Those four areas are knowledge management related activities. Document handling. Document assembly, components, content management, and records management. Again, any questions?
Do you want to just briefly mention what component content management is compared to enterprise content management?
Oh, sure. So component content management is, I'm going to steal your sheet. Component content management, I'm going to use her document here for a second, is like taking that paragraph or another paragraph, and instead of this document then is 2 pages of text, it's actually broken down into its separate paragraphs, its separate pieces, so that it can be reused in another document or on another website, so it maintains the consistency and the integrity of the information, so you don't get the information in this document isn't different from the information that you would find on the web. Do you want to say something more?
No, that's...
Okay. So enterprise content management is across the enterprise, it looks at a higher level, so it would be managing the documents and higher level activities in the content of an organization. So sharing and collaboration. So this is lessons learned activities. Everybody understand the concept of lessons learned? No?
I've been divorced, I got
it. Okay. So for those of us who haven't been divorced, lessons learned is about learning throughout the life of a project or a matter, use the right legal terminology, or a case, and is taking, it depends on the situation. You can do lessons learned activities every day, every week. I would argue in some circumstances they need to be done every day and capture. It's not an onerous problem activity. It's what worked, what didn't work. So at the end of the day, what worked and what didn't work. And then at the end of the week, what worked and what didn't work. Especially cases that may go on for several years. By the time you get to the end of it, you won't remember what happened on day one. And maybe what happened on day one was incredibly important to the rest of the outcome of the case. But if you haven't documented it, by the time you get to the end, there's been personnel changes probably. You may not remember that happened on day one or day two of the case, and that doesn't get captured. But it would be important for other people handling similar matters or cases at some point in the future. So lessons learned is just about capturing what's worked and what hasn't worked, and putting it in a database somewhere so that people can search it and find it and learn from your mistakes or your things that have gone well. Communities of so is that okay? Everybody okay on lessons learned now? For those of us who weren't divorced, communities of practice or practice groups. Again, as Connie said, communities of practice is a knowledge management term, industry term. It's practice groups within the law firms. So, but are people okay with that concept? Okay. Sharing and collaboration, back to social media collaboration, of course. So creating documents, creating activities, doing activities together to complete work activities, and expertise location. So if I am new to the firm, for instance, or maybe I've been with the firm for a while, but I don't know all the new people that have come in, I'm looking for a junior lawyer, I can go in and look for particular expertise or experience levels and find people that way. Supporting knowledge management activities are IT management. So the IT department has its own knowledge management needs and requirements. A lot of organizations forget about that, especially in large organizations like when I worked at HP. The IT department was 3,500 people. They had their own, as one might imagine, set of documentation and knowledge needs and sharing. So there's a whole set of activities that go there. Then workflow and search. And innovation. So this is about idea management on one level, or business intelligence. It's pulling information out of existing people or systems and making better decisions or doing innovative things with it. So, and this is the life cycle I was talking about a minute or two ago. So it goes starts at capture and create. So I'm working with Connie on something, we're collaborating, maybe there's some workflow, because after I'm done the document, it needs to be approved, so it goes off for approval. So that's captured and create, it goes into the repository, gets tagged with the metadata, so that people can find it easier, so that possibly I can find it easier later on. Get some access control, perhaps. There's only a subset of people in the firm that should have access to it. So we put some access controls on it. Then it goes into use and retrieve. So that third quadrant on the diagram I had up before with the circles. Use and retrieval, sorry. This is where I'm finding it. It's sitting in the repository. Or the lessons learned database or whatever. Periodically, it's going to be reviewed, and we're going to say, it's been a year, this piece of knowledge hasn't been used, this piece of documented knowledge hasn't been used. Is that because it's out of date? Is it still relevant? Should it still be here? Should we remove it? Is it something we thought was going to be useful and isn't? So there's a review process after a set period of time, oftentimes a year. And a decision is made about whether it should stay there, if it's active and been actively used and accessed, or whether it needs to be removed and archived and deleted from the system. And that comes into the records management piece of the puzzle. So this is the knowledge management roadmap. So now we've kind of way ahead of time. I've talked too fast. So I'm going to let you look at that.
You can go through this in excruciating detail.
Just what we need for after lunch. So we laid out a bunch of concepts in the first part of the presentation. And the question always is, well, that's nice. Knowledge management is a nice thing to do, but how do I do it? What do? I know there's communities of practice. I know there's document repositories. I know there's mentoring. I know all these things. What do I do with them? How do I sort this out and do something useful within my organization? And so the first part of those first 4 steps are the planning and organization that goes around it. So it's looking at the business processes and information flows and the organization strategy and the IT strategy, and understanding the big picture what the organization is doing right now, what the firm is doing right now, and where they would like to go, where they would like to be in 5 years, how they would like to manage their knowledge better, how innovative they would like to be, how much more efficient or effective in their knowledge handling they would like to be. So it's that current state analysis and figuring out to what the future state looks like. And that comes out of the analyze and resolve. So the analyze, we're also looking at best practices. So not necessarily best practices just within law firms. There's a lot to be learned with knowledge management especially, but in any area, from looking at other organizations that on first blush may not look like they have a lot to do or a lot of similarities. And I used to have a good example of this, and it's gone completely out of my head. But there's the automakers all have knowledge management activities to make them more productive. Well, so the question is there something that they're doing that law firms can learn from? Looking at those different organizations, maybe there's stuff in healthcare. Privacy is a big issue in healthcare, as it is with law firms. There's things that healthcare is doing with privacy that the law firms can learn from. Those kinds of ideas. Don't just look at other law firms. Although that's useful, that's going to be limiting as well. So that analysis happens there. It gets resolved into policies and processes, some initial metrics, get laid out, some strategic goals, some identification of the people who should participate in a governance activity, and of course change management. And you'll see there's change management at each step. So it will look different. The communication and education is different at each step, but it's happening at each step. This is an activity that you have to bring every person in the organization along with you on. No man or woman left behind, right? So there's lots of change management happening. Also, out of the resolve step, you've got then an idea of, okay, what's important for me to do first? What's a priority for us to do first? Maybe it is getting our repository. For a lot of organizations, there's a big focus on documented knowledge because that's something that they don't do well, that creates a lot of chaos and confusion for employees because they can't find the information they need when they need it. So that may be the priority within the organization, or maybe there isn't a portal and they need that one place to go for people to get the information they need about the organization. So whatever the priority is, you come up with a prioritized list out of that resolve step, and then some identification then around the requirements, the requirements for technology. And so that's the fourth step there is looking at the technology and selecting what would be the appropriate technology. And I'm going to take another drink of water.
So the two brackets she hasn't explained, but the first set of brackets are sort of the planning stages to this, and then the second set are the implementation and use.
Thank you. So, and they are definitely not, you can't look at it and say, well, each step is a month. That's not how it happens at all. In fact, the fifth step, the design, develop, test, and change management happens, that could be 6 months or a year or longer, because that's your implementation and your technology, picking the technology and getting the technology configured and implemented to meet the needs of the firm. So there's no set timeline on any of these steps. So then implementation, use, and evolving. Knowledge management, as with a lot of other activities, is always evolving. The staff of the organization gets used to participating in communities of practice and sharing knowledge. So how do we take that to the next level? And there are maturity curves and things that I would look at in another presentation, but to help you evolve that and make the organization. There's always something better that you could be doing, and always something new on the horizon that's been developed and can be incorporated into your activities. Do you want to do the case studies?
I don't know as much about this one.
Okay. So this is we've got a couple of case studies, and then we'll let you ask some questions. If you're not, I'll put to sleep by now. This is a law firm here in the city. Is anyone from Osler? No? Okay. So this is about their portal implementation. It was successful. They're actually very proud of it. They wrote it up for a case study in a report that I published about a year ago. So, but the key thing, and there's a lot of text there, and you can read it if you want, or as I speak, but I'm not going to read it to you. The key takeaway there is that they involved people at every step of the execution of the project. So there were people had input into the technology. There were people that had input into how it got organized, what information went in. So people were involved throughout, and that's how they made it successful. Certainly, I've seen large projects fail because they alienated sponsors and didn't involve the users and spend $1 million on technology and it didn't involve anyone, and then wondered why no one used this technology and figured that they had wasted money. So not the case with these guys. They made sure that there was lots of participation throughout the firm. And this one you can do.
This one, yeah. Okay. Anyone here from Hicks Morley? No? Okay. This was written up by Heather Coleman, who is the knowledge management specialist at Hicks Morley. She's been very kind and shared this with us publicly. They implemented a content management system called Thought Farmer, which happens to be a wiki-based content management system. And essentially, again, there's a lot of text here, but what they did was they started off, they knew that their intranet that they were using was an HTML, pretty flat system, no content management system underneath. It was difficult to add content to it, and it wasn't being used as a result. New content was being sent to someone centrally in the firm, and it was then taking a while for it to get added, and as a result, it was just becoming stagnant. People really weren't using it at all. So when she arrived at the firm, one of the first projects she did was to have a look at this and see could they improve upon this. And they had the idea that possibly a wiki, a wiki is a platform that allows anyone who has access to it to add content to the site without having to know a lot of code. You could just ideally open up a editor similar to what you would use in email or in Word and just add new content or edit the content that's there. So they had this idea that they would use a wiki-based platform. And so they looked at what they had at hand that would be easy to try out. So they found a practice group in the firm that was a sort of an small early adopter group, I think about 10 lawyers. And they started off with Lotus Wiki. They happened to be a Lotus Notes shop, and they just said, well, let's just try this out and see how it works. And so they gave it a shot, and actually they had good success with it. And from that, they then went through and figured out the requirements that they needed in order to, the requirements that they wanted for their final software, their final platform that they wanted. This was okay. It gave them the concept of how this was going to work, and it gave them an idea of how they were all going to work with it. And they made a list of requirements. And from then they went out and looked for a new platform. And specifically, they weren't necessarily looking for a content management system. They were looking for specifically for a wiki platform. And they went out and looked at all the different wiki platforms, and there are hundreds out there, and created a short list. And from that short list, they narrowed it down and figured out that they wanted to work with Thought Farmer, which happens to be a system created by a consulting firm out in Vancouver, BC. And so that's what they brought into the firm, and then they did the implementation. So they, again, started with that early adopter group, the group that were keen to get them rolling with it, and then they rolled it out to the whole firm. And it had sort of good traction. A few people were using it, and what their real success, their real breakthrough was when one of the senior partners was in the office late at night. This was a fellow who was actually a skeptic about this whole thing. Why do we need it? Why are we spending time on redoing it? The other thing didn't work. Why bother? But he was in the office late at night. He was about to call somebody for help to find a document he really needed. And he thought, well, I'm just going to try it and see if it works. I probably won't. He went in and actually immediately, like within half a minute, found the document he needed. He was blown away at how efficient this was. He didn't have to call anyone, disturb anyone. And from there, he actually went out and became a real champion for the project. He started proselytizing it, poking all the other partners, you need to use this, that's really good. And they've had good success. They haven't had everybody adopt it across the board, but they've had people actually contribute documents and content and edit pages from the full spectrum of the firm. She has numbers that she has shared with how many people have contributed, how many new documents have been added as well. So it has been seen as quite a success. Stephanie talked about that roadmap to implementing knowledge management, and she talked about how some of these projects can take 6 months, 2 years. It can take time to do this. To give you an idea with this, in a big firm, to implement the system SharePoint, it could take 2-3 years to get it up to speed with where you want it to be. So from the time that they did the initial pilot project with Lotus Wiki and got it into bringing in Thought Farmer, like gathering the requirements, bringing it into Thought Farmer and implementing it and getting it to people to use it, it was 6 months that they did, which is incredibly, incredibly fast for a project like this. So, but they really followed sort of the steps along the way, did it right, so to speak. And so that's sort of quite a nice case study for this kind of project. Now, I think at this point I think the rest is just some concluding slides.
Yeah.
So we were wondering if you have any questions. We have a little bit of time.
Yep.
If you have questions about sort of knowledge management generally, is there anything we didn't explain? Yes?
Do you often find a law firm wanting some component of client-facing?
It can go along with that. Especially the big firms will have counsel, client counsel, asking to be able to share portions of systems and that sort of thing. Yeah. That's not uncommon. And there will also, being able to access sort of documents and records and that sort of thing. So you get into the area, we haven't talked about it explicitly here, but extranets, where there's a secure area, or deal rooms, where there's a secure area you can share content together and that sort of thing. So that's probably the most common manifestation of that. Does anyone here, or I was going to say, does anyone here have an example, perhaps? Perhaps there's an example in the audience where people have been asked to share with clients.
Yeah, just use Dropbox or Box.net.
Dropbox or Box.net, okay. And you found that's worked very well with just sharing documents, yeah. Yeah, so there could be simple things depending on, yes?
So I'd like to ask about your work as consultants when you're brought in on a project to advise as to how to better manage the knowledge within the organization. What are some of the indicators that you see very quickly that the project you're going to work on with this client will be successful in making them better manage that knowledge? And what are some of the indicators that, no matter what we do, this is probably not going to work?
So what are the indicators of possible success when we come in?
So when you go to a client,
yeah.
how do you know, okay, this is actually going to be a project where they're trying, but it's not working, but we can fix it, versus we're going to try, but this doesn't look like it's going to work.
Yeah. Do you want to give the first crack at this? I have an answer, but...
Sure. So a couple of things. Well, the first thing is I typically will start wherever they are. So if they're not used to sharing information and things, then I take that into account in the assessment and start from that point in my change management and those other recommendations. One thing, though, I will say that is very telling about whether I should even take the work or not is if someone at a senior management level, because I do a lot of work with corporations, I'll say VP level or above. If there's not someone there acting as sponsor on it, I question really the ability or the interest of the organization in doing it, and that it's not that knowledge management is something that comes top down. Top down doesn't work, but there is an element of it. People do look at their senior managers and say, well, Jane Doe or John Smith isn't doing it, he's still got all those paper documents in his file, he's not participating or she's not participating in community, whatever. They do look and notice those kinds of things. So if there's no support at that upper level, then yeah, I kind of question. And then of course there's a question too, if there's no support at that level, whether they have the budget to do it, because it doesn't require a lot of technology, but there is time and money invested, just even in a personnel perspective, and freeing people up to participate in communities of practice. So if there's no buy-in at that senior level, that's very telling. So.
Yeah, my answer is very similar to Stephanie's. A lot of times you'll have a junior manager or like a middle manager trying to do a project like this off the corner of their desk under the radar of senior. And in some ways it can be done, but bringing me in as a consultant, yeah, it's not going to work, because at some point it's going to go beyond the scope of that. You know, if somebody is a smart manager, can quietly sort of manage up and get some of the ideas instilled, then that will work. But when you start to sort of make it a bigger project, then it does become more substantial, and it's a lot harder to do. So that is one thing that I look at. I also look at the attitude towards technology, and this is what Stephanie was talking about when she was talking about the approach of people, process, and technology. A lot of times people will say, oh, this technology is intuitive, we'll just throw it in and it's going to work. If the technology you had before is not working, it doesn't matter what you bring in new. If you don't change the way people are working with it and the processes, then the new one is going to equally fail. So that's another thing that I look at is the attitude towards the technology that they're working with as well.
Do you encounter those problems with Canadian law firms, or are they doing separate?
I've seen it sort of across industries. So yeah. It just depends. I think a lot of what I've seen has been in the big firms, and I think the big firms have gone through a lot and are getting experience, and I think are getting a lot smarter in this area.
Is there any document management software that you would recommend for smaller firms?
It's going to depend on requirements. Again, I don't know if Stephanie has any offhand, but
yeah, not anything that I would be willing to give a blanket statement to. No, I would want to know a bit more about it than.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, depending how small the firm is, a shared drive could be enough. You don't necessarily need wild technology to do it, or something like Dropbox, which does versioning. Could be enough, but it depends really on the needs and the requirements and how big, how many people we're talking about.
Yeah, some of the new cloud-based practice management platforms also have document management and even document word processing included in it. So something like Clio or MyCase or Rocket Matter, they have different features as well. So it all depends on the requirements of the firm. Any other questions?
Can you just say a bit more about Quote Farmer?
Yes.
A little bit more about that one.
Oh, okay. So, like I said, it was developed by some consultants, and I'm trying to remember the name of the consulting company. Very smart fellows. They were finding that they wanted to offer something to their clients, so they developed this platform. Like I say, it's wiki-based, but actually now they're just calling it a content management system. If you look at it, they've added a lot of social features to it. So every individual who's in the firm would have a profile. It would show you, and it's too bad I didn't bring screenshots, but it would show you who like the reporting structure, who you're reporting to, who you're working with. So if you have an assistant, who that assistant is. If you've added documents, public documents to the system, it will show those documents, list them. If you have favorite documents on the system, and it also it's kind of fun. On the very front, it will show you latest activity on the system. So who's added things, so you get a feel for it. If you see a senior partner is using it, you can tell that maybe it's actually useful, and so that sort of helps to drive the use as well. So they've actually added a number of social layers to the system as well. I actually quite like Thought Farmer, and as a consultant, it's hard for me to say because really you don't really need me in the picture. You can just go straight to them and they can help you implement it. It's quite nice. Yes?
One of the underlying messages of Law Tech Camp so far is that there's some discussion about how there's certain inherent features in law, inherent features in the legal profession, inherent features in maybe personalities of people that work in law that make our entire profession resistant to technological change or innovation or really moving towards an efficient solutions to things.
Yeah.
And I'm curious whether your experience, since you've worked in with other industries, would back that up, that somehow working with your law firm clients, that somehow they are, a decade behind some of the other industries, or whether the challenges that are faced by law firms in dealing with their knowledge management are the same or somehow different as other industrial sectors.
Yeah. I'll start to answer the question, and I'll throw it to Stephanie. But so a couple of the things with law firms, it is a conservative profession, so you're not going to be necessarily what do they call it? They always say leading edge, not bleeding edge, right? Not the bleeding edge. So there's a conservatism. There's also a risk aversion as well. And the thing within law is that each practitioner is such a smart knowledge worker, and each person develops your own system of doing things, which totally makes sense to the work you're doing and the way you're doing it, so that bringing in and imposing a standard across the whole organization, across all these people who each have their own smart way of doing things, can be difficult. So that's the challenge. But that being said, you could see the similar things in other industries as well. And I think Stephanie will probably have some examples of that, some ideas.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. I think that based on my limited exposure to Canadian law firms, I think they are conservative. I think Canadian organizations generally are conservative and look at knowledge management and go, well, we're not big international companies. We're not HP. We're not, whoever. We don't really need. That's where we don't really need that. So I think the law firms, again, with my limited exposure to them, are sort of take that the next step more conservative and things, and so are slower to adopt. I have done some work internationally. I look at some of the international organizations I've worked with. I was in Abu Dhabi last year on a project for a month, and they were very keen. A startup organization, energy corporation, starting up. They were very keen to know what the best practices were in knowledge management, how they implement them, what they want to do, who's doing the best, and go and talk to whoever's doing it the best and bring those practices here. There's a knowledge management award system called MAKE, for Most Admired Knowledge Enterprises. They wanted to know how they got shortlisted for that list within 5 years. That was one of the deliverables we gave them, was how you get on that shortlist for the MAKE awards within 5 years. So they were really enthusiastic and weren't conservative at all or hesitant at all about going out and stealing the best practices from some, not stealing, but borrowing and learning from other organizations. And I don't see that same drive within Canadian organizations. They're more willing to sit back and go, well, we'll do it when we absolutely have to. So. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to repeat what Kate said for the camera, she said that the business partner model isn't helping it, that you need to have the decisions made by the partnership to move things along. You can't just delegate it to one group and move it along. So it takes longer for everything to happen. That's summary? Okay. Yes?
I think you're going to see that change as the generations change.
Yeah.
Our firms, we've always been 3 or 4 people, geographically dispersed. I never wanted to be in the office. And all our back office infrastructure is designed. It doesn't matter where you are as long as you're doing that.
Yeah. Yes.
And everything from accounting to document management to internal knowledge management to task tracking to everything. we actually had to roll our own. There's nothing out there that does what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
no one component product.
Yeah.
Which firm is this?
Oh yeah, innovative. But I mean,
Yeah.
we run it as a tech company. Like, this is a bit of a digression. But
Yeah.
there's nothing you said here that has not been done in software management.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Tracking,
Yeah.
source code tracking. Even the change tracking is better. You can track batches of changes. You roll them out, you know why you apply them, you roll them back, you roll them in. You have revision control. You hit targets, like this is a deliverable. You track all the changes for that one. No more changes, this is a drop dead date. More changes next batch. And for me, for legal documents, I don't understand why we don't do that. I don't understand how they draft legislation without that. I think that's crazy. Anyways, that's my personal.
We should be tracking changes with legislation, yeah. Legal documents generally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Metrics and measurement with
Yeah.
respect to customer service. So what are some of the other things that you guys that really move the needle in terms of measurement?
Measuring? Do you have a?
Oh, I'm not sure if I have a good example off the top of my head. It's so dependent on the organization, what the metrics should be and things. So ultimately it comes back to making sure that people know what they're being measured on, knowing, so that they can, modify their behavior. That said, you want to be careful what you're measuring because you will get exactly what you're measuring. So when I was at HP, just to tell a quick HP story, the salespeople were measured on how much they sold to new customers. So we got a whole bunch of new customers. They weren't compensated the same way on the existing client base, so they ignored them. It costs a lot more to get a new client or a new customer than it does to keep an old one happy. So
I think, Drew, do you have an answer to that too?
No, I have
Yeah.
a question.
Okay.
Oh.
Is there any way to benchmark across companies?
Oh, sure, yeah. There are organizations that benchmark. Yeah, APQC is one of the big ones in the States, American Productivity and Quality Center. They do a lot of benchmarking. So, yeah, absolutely there is.
Yeah, we were in the UK in December and saw the KIN, which is the Knowledge and Innovation Network,
Yep.
that has brings together different companies from different industries, and they benchmark across them as well too.
Yep.
So they would need to use common metrics for each company.
I don't know if they were benchmarking. Yeah, I don't know how they were doing that specifically. They had specific methods for doing it, but yeah. Another measure actually within law firms is looking to see contributions to the knowledge management system, and some firms tie that into compensation as well.
So given your comments about Canadian firms in general being more conservative, do you feel that there exists right now a big opportunity for a medium, smaller sized law firm that effectively, if it manages its knowledge better than its full service firm counterparts, it has a real competitive advantage in the market?
Yes, I think so. I think any organization that takes a strategic approach to knowledge and knowledge management has a competitive advantage.
And how would you advise a firm to actively manage that in terms of the structure? Should there be a person or a couple of people who are exclusively dedicated to that type of work, or is it something that everybody needs to? How do you?
Yes.
Create that culture?
Yes,
Both of those.
Both of those. So
Yeah.
usually one, maybe two people, depending on how big the organization is, to lead the KM program. But then that's something that is cross-functional, cross-organizational. So it's something that's everyone needs to be involved in.
And how long should people expect the results to come from?
Results can vary. Some of the stuff I did at HP, we had, I had measurable numbers within 10 months to say that this has had an impact on our bottom line. It depends if you're, it depends what the situation is, and what the problem is you're trying to solve with it.
Yeah, some of these projects are could be small, quick wins. Some of them can be larger, strategic. So you probably would want to start with a quick win to show some success early, and then as you gain experience with the organization and the organization learns, then expand that out into the larger strategic projects. But we just have like a minute left, so I just want to go through our last slides. Oh, I have 2011. Is that an old slide? Anyway, this is actually a 2011 report Stephanie put together for Art Group, and she has a coupon. So if anyone, what's the coupon for exactly?
It's a discount. Art Group, their model is the reports are very expensive. So if you're interested in it, I have a coupon. If you come and give me your card, I will email you the coupon. You'll get about $300 off the report. So the report is like $500. So.
What's the total?
The total?
After the coupon?
Oh, it's $500. So I have a coupon for $300 off. So it's $200.
Stephanie and I and another consultant, Martin Cleaver, organize a meetup group called Knowledge Workers Toronto, and it's split up into two. We have sessions geared towards methodology and sessions towards technology, and we try to meet on a monthly basis here in Toronto, usually at a pub after work, and we get some really great speakers out. Our next one is May 22nd with Jed. What's Jed's last name? He's
Hawthorne.
Hawthorne?
Cawthorne.
Cawthorne from BMO Finance is going to be joining us to talk about
Enterprise
ECM,
content.
Enterprise Content Management, and KM. And we've just put together, we can make these slides available online, but put together a list of blogs and other sources for knowledge management. Most of these are in the legal area as well. Thank you very much.
That's it.